So, how many of you take history or have taken history? Most of us, right? Most of us have taken at least one history class. History is more than just some bunch of dates or memorizing dates or random facts or even just learning stuff about some dead people that we'd never heard about before. History is a story. History is actually our story. And if we look at it very carefully enough, we can see ourselves reflected in history. We can actually learn a lot about ourselves. One such story that helps us understand this is Lois Lowry's Number the Stars. It's historical fiction, which means it is based on some things in history, but it's got a fiction element. In the story, Lois crafts the story of a young girl and her family in Denmark during the Nazi occupation. And the story really lets this young girl look at herself and her family and really understand what it is about bravery. I'd like to share a part of the story with you. Peter tells us that the Germans have issued orders closing many stores run by Jews. Jews? Anne-Marie repeated. Is Mrs. Hirsch Jewish? Is that why the button shop is closed? Why have they done that? Peter leaned forward. It is their way of tormenting. For some reason, they want to torment Jewish people. It has happened in other countries. They have taken their time here, have let us relax a little, but now it seems to be starting. But why the button shop? What harm is a button shop? Mrs. Hirsch is such a nice lady. Even Samuel. He's a dope, but he would never harm anyone. How could he? He can't even see with his thick glasses. Then Anne-Marie thought of something else. If they can't sell their buttons, how will they earn a living? Friends will take care of them, Mama said gently. That's what friends do. Anne-Marie nodded. Mama was right, of course. Friends and neighbors would go to the home of the Hirsch family, would take them fish and potatoes and bread and herbs for making tea. Maybe Peter would even take them a beer. They would be comfortable until their shop was allowed to open again. Then suddenly she sat up right, her eyes wide. Mama, she said. Papa, the Rosens are Jewish. Her parents nodded, their faces serious and drawn. I talked to Sophie Rosen this afternoon after you told me about the button shop, Mama said. She knows what is happening, but she doesn't think that will affect them. Anne-Marie thought and understood. She relaxed. Mr. Rosen doesn't have a shop. He's a teacher. They can't close a whole school. She looked at Peter with the question in her eyes. Can they? I think the Rosens will be all right, he said. But you keep an eye on your friend Ellen and stay away from the soldiers. Your mother told me about what happened at Osterbrigade. Anne-Marie shrugged. She'd almost forgotten the incident. It was nothing. They were only bored and looking for someone to talk to, I think. She turned to her father. Papa, do you remember that story you told me, or you heard this boy say to the soldier, that all of Denmark would be the king's bodyguard? Her father smiled. I've never forgotten it, he said. Well, Anne-Marie said slowly, now I think that all of Denmark must be bodyguards for the Jews as well. So we shall be, Papa said. Peter stood. I must go, he said, and you, Longlegs, it is way past your bedtime now. He hugged Anne-Marie again. Later, once more in her bed, beside the warm cocoon of her sister, Anne-Marie remembered her father had said 3 years before that he would die to protect the king, that her mother would too, and Anne-Marie, 7 years old, had announced proudly that she would also. Now she was 10, with long legs and no more silly dreams of pink frosted cupcakes. And now she, all of the Danes, were to be bodyguard for Ellen and Ellen's parents and all of Denmark's Jews. Would she die to protect them? Truly? Anne-Marie was honest enough to admit, there in the darkness, to herself that she wasn't sure. For a moment she felt frightened, but she pulled the blanket up higher around her neck and relaxed. It was all imaginary anyway, not real. It was only in the fairy tales that people were called upon to be so brave, to die for one another. Not in real life Denmark. Oh, there were soldiers, that was true, and the courageous resistance leaders, who sometimes lost their lives, that was true too. But ordinary people, like the Rosens and the Johansons, Anne-Marie admitted to herself, snuggling there in the quiet dark, that she was glad to be an ordinary person who would never be called upon for courage. So, I suggest you read the rest of this little tale and find out exactly what Anne Marie was called to do and exactly what she learned about bravery. And while you're reading, ask yourself, what would I do? What if this were my story? What if this happened now? How would they write about me? What would be my experience?